Hello everybody, Toreno here, and welcome back to another episode of my proposed International Tank Tech Tree series. Now today we are looking at Egypt, and there's three vehicles we're going to be looking at. The Sherman with the FL-10 turret, T-100 and the T-122. Now, like I said, there's only three vehicles. Unfortunately, while Egypt has built a lot of vehicles, they're mostly outside of the timeline, so we're just going to stick to these three vehicles. Now, just to give a bit of background history about Egypt during this time, at the beginning of War Thunder in the 1930s, Egypt was still a British protectorate, not part of the empire but not really independent either. During World War II, while there was a lot of fighting around Egypt, for example at El Alamein, a massive famous battle, the Egyptian army itself wasn't really used during the war. I think there were some trust issues and possibly wasn't particularly well equipped. In 1948, Egypt got involved in the first of the Arab-Israeli wars, which didn't go particularly great for Egypt. In 1953, Egypt became a republic. The monarchy was overthrown and exiled. In 1954, a man named Gamal Abdel Nasser overthrew the president and became the president himself. And he actually nationalised the Suez Canal 2 years later, while banning Israeli shipping from the Straits of Tiran. The British, French and Israelis were kind of angry and decided to invade Egypt, and militarily it didn't go too well for Egypt. They were beaten quite easily, which, to be fair, they were going up against some of the most powerful nations on the earth, so, not too surprising. However, politically things went much better. Lots of political and economical pressure was applied to Britain, France and Israel by the Arab states, the Soviet Union, America, and eventually they were all forced to withdraw. Although the Israelis did actually achieve their goal, they did get the Straits of Tiran open to Israeli shipping. Other than some involvement in the North Yemen civil war, things were relatively peaceful for the next 10 years or so. Egypt actually joined up with Syria and formed the United Arab Republic, which only really lasted something like 3 years, but until Syria left. But, still a bit of interesting history that most people don't know about. Egypt had also sort of started cozying up with the Soviet Union and started to receive a lot of Soviet weapons. But in 1967, Egypt was attacked by Israel. Israel claims it was a preemptive strike, other Arab nations claim it was an invasion. Again, things went quite badly, and Egypt lost the Sinai, which gave Israel access to the Suez Canal. It actually controlled one side of the Suez Canal. Lots of other Arab states also lost territory. In 1973, Egypt struck back. They had lots of new weapons from the Soviet Union, which allowed them to make a, pretty good air defense system around the Suez Canal, and they had quite a bit of success at first. But they brought the Syrians in, and the Syrians didn't do as well. So to help the Syrians, the Egyptians started launching attacks against Israel, which led to them going outside of their air defence, which led to them taking quite bad losses, and Israel counter-attacking and taking back most of the territory, and I think even invading Egypt at some point. The last war which really fits into War Thunder's timeline is the Libyan-Egyptian War, where Libya tried to invade Egypt, and, well, predictably this didn't go particularly well, and Egypt, kicked them out pretty easily. Since then, the Sinai has actually been returned to Egypt by the Israelis after a peace accord was signed, and Egypt has sort of started, well, it did realign itself towards the Americans, started getting American equipment, and, started building its own equipment, which, has built some pretty good stuff. But now we've got the basic background history of Egypt and the wars it was involved in out of the way, let's get straight into the episode. Now, the first Egyptian vehicle we're looking at is this Egyptian variant of the M4 Sherman, and it's basically an M4A4 Sherman, which we don't have in the game at the moment. It's got a lengthened hull and it's got a Chrysler engine, gasoline engine, but the Egyptians have put in an M2A2 diesel engine and the FL-10 turret from the AMX-13 light tank. Now, the FL-10 turret could carry two different weapons, a 75mm gun, the SA-50, and a 90mm gun. Now, there isn't much information about this tank, but any information I have found has mostly suggested it used a 75mm gun, which makes the most sense, because the French didn't add the 90mm gun to their own AMX-13s until I believe around 1966. I'm not sure when this vehicle came into service, but I've seen some suggestions it may have been around as early as the Suez Crisis in 1956. And while it's possible it could have come into service at a later date, I still think it would have been far too early to get the 90mm gun. There was also the possibility of 105mm guns being used on the AMX-13, however I don't think these could be used on the FL-10 turret, so it's very unlikely they would have used 105mm guns either. Now, before we go on to the gun stats though, I just want to talk a little bit about the FL-10 turret. The FL-10 turret is unique in that it's one of the only oscillating turrets to actually go into operational service. The only other turret I can think of is the one on the SK-105 Austrian tank destroyer, and I think even that's a variant of the AMX-13 turrets. I think it's the FL-12. But for those of you who don't know, an oscillating turret, how can I explain it? If you get a normal tank and you elevate the gun barrel goes up. If you do it in an oscillating turret, the entire turret moves with the gun, which basically makes it a lot easier for autoloaders to be used, because this does have an autoloader. It has two revolver-like magazines, which carry something like 6 shots each, and you can fire a shot once every 5 seconds, so 12 shots in a minute. Unfortunately, to reload the revolver shells, you need to get out of the vehicle, which isn't particularly practical when under fire, and I'm guessing is going to be quite time consuming. Now, moving on to the penetration statistics, I don't want to go into too in-depth about the information because obviously it's a French gun. I'm going to be talking about it a lot during the French episodes. But for the 75mm gun, I found the following penetration statistics. The Directory of Modern Military Weapons says they only used high explosive and heat, and that heat had a penetration of 170mm. I found some references online citing Jane's Armour and Artillery 1984-85 edition, page 38, stating there was an armour-piercing capped and armour-piercing capped ballistic capped. I think the statistics are for 1,000 metres, not entirely sure. But for APC, it could do 110mm penetration at 0 degrees and 60mm at 60 degrees. And the APC BC could do 170mm at 0 degrees and 40mm at 60 degrees. I've also seen 1 or 2 references to an armour-piercing discarding sabot, but they didn't cite any sources, so, take that with a pinch of salt, but they gave 300mm at 0 degrees and 80mm at 60 degrees. Now, moving on from the gun, we've got the armour of this tank, and like I said, it's supposed to have been built on the M4A4, which we don't have in War Thunder at the moment. However, assuming it's got the same armour as the M4A2 and the M4A3, it should have about 63mm of armour on the front, which would give it roughly an effective thickness of between 80 and 95mm. However, the FL-10 turret is a bit of a different story because it's from the AMX-13, which was a light tank. The thickest the armour got on that vehicle was 40mm at the front. I'm not sure if that includes the turret, but best case scenario, we've got a turret with 40mm thickness, and worst case scenario, it's probably going to be a lot thinner than that. It's not really going to be blocking any shot. Which made sense, because the FL-10 turret and the rest of the AMX-13 were designed after the war, when heat rounds could basically penetrate any tank in the world. It was kind of seen as a bit pointless to keep adding increasing amounts of armour, because it would be penetrated anyway, so the French went with the lightly armoured, fast AMX-13, and so the turret didn't need to be particularly well armoured. This is somewhat related to the next stat we're looking at, speed. Most of the M4 Shermans in-game do about 24 to 30 miles an hour or so. So not particularly slow, but not particularly fast either. However, it does put it at quite a bit of a disadvantage, because obviously the FL-10 turret was originally mated to the AMX-13, which was 37 miles per hour top speed, which was good for getting flanking shots and the like. The gun's not really meant to be used against frontal armour, but if it's attached to the Sherman, it's going to be quite a lot slower. You're not going to get as many opportunities to take flanking shots. You're going to end up in a role it really isn't suited to. So yeah, the mobility could be a bit of a disadvantage for this tank. Now, the last major stat we need to look at is the crew, and the regular Shermans had 5 crew, gunner, loader, commander, bow machine gunner, driver. Obviously, the autoloader gets rid of the loader, so that takes us down to 4 crew. It depends if they kept the bow machine gunner. You can see the machine gun is still in the bow of the tank, so presumably they did keep the bow machine gunner, the Egyptians. But I couldn't really find much information about the crew, but I'm going to assume they kept the bow machine gunner, so best case scenario 4 crew, worst case scenario they did get rid of the bow machine gunner and only 3 crew. So where do I think this tank could go on the tech tree? Well, we deal with the battle rating first. The only similar tank to this that I really know of is the T-92 light tank, which is slated to be released in patch 1.53. We don't know what battle rating that's going to be exactly, but leaks from the Chinese dev server suggest 6.7, which does seem about right. I think that's the same as the T44, which, if I'm correct, actually has worse ammo than the SA-50 75mm gun, so yeah, that does seem like a good battle rating, especially for a light tank. However, there is some bad news with this battle rating, because as most of you are probably aware by now, a new battle rating system has sort of been introduced. Basically, all the Cold War tanks have been reduced in battle rating, so they now can meet 6.7 tanks, which doesn't really make any sense to my mind. Mags TV actually did a pretty good episode about the battle rating changes and, you know, their bad effects. So that kind of makes it not very good battle rating at the same time, because, well, 6.7 would have been quite good in the old system, but now it's going to be going up against T54s, M60s, Leopard 2s. I mean, it could deal with the Leopard 2, but the M60s and the T54s and T10s, which were tanks that this was never designed to go against. As I've said, the AMX-13 was meant to go for flanking shots and such. This is on a slower M4A4 hull, so it's not even going to be able to get as many flanking shots. It's going to end up, you know, having to duel with these tanks like frontal armour, and it's just not going to work. I suppose you could possibly put it down to battle rating 6.3. I'm not entirely sure. 6.3 to 6.7 does seem like the most sensible thing. Hopefully they'll change the battle rating system back and put the Cold War tanks up in battle rating, so, you know, it could go to 6.7 and not have to meet all these overpowered tanks. But 6.3 to 6.7 seems the best place. Although even then 6.3 might be a little too low, but that's the only thing I can think of, really. Of course, I also have to decide where to put the tank in the tech tree itself, and I've put it in undecided/premium, because we've got a lot of tanks with the 75mm gun from the AMX-13. We've got the SA-49, a short 75mm, and the SA-50 variant of the AMX-13 with the longer 75mm. We've got the M50 Sherman, which was an Israeli variant, which is pretty well known. I believe that and the M51 are known as Super Shermans. You could put the Egyptian variant in the light/medium tank line of the tech tree, but then you're going to be going through about 3 or 4 variants of tanks, which are pretty similar with the same gun. So it could possibly go in a premium part of the tech tree, because these were only made in small numbers, from what I understand, as opposed to the AMX-13 and the Israeli variants, which were built in rather larger numbers. So possibly a premium or in the medium part of the tech tree, in the medium line. But I think this would be a nice tank to see in the game. I do hope it could be added. It would be nice to have this tank. It would be at a bit of a disadvantage, but it seems like a unique vehicle, and I do hope it could be added to War Thunder. Now, the next Egyptian vehicle we're looking at is this tank destroyer, the T-100, also known confusingly as the T-34-100. Some of you may already know we have a T-34-100 in War Thunder already, so I'll just refer to it as the T-100. Now, this was armed with the Soviet BS-3 anti-tank gun, and it looks like it's going to fall over. It just looks too big for the chassis, which is a T-34 chassis. Honestly, I'm surprised it hasn't just fallen over on its own. Now, from what I understand, the BS-3 was quite a powerful anti-tank gun. Unless I'm mistaken, it uses the same ammunition as other Soviet 100mm guns, namely the BR-412, 412B and the 412D. Now, the penetration stats for this ammunition seems to be the same across all the vehicles that use it, about 188mm at 500 metres with armour piercing, 0 degrees. The armour piercing high explosive ballistic capped about 191mm at 0 degrees, 500 metres, and 197 with the armour piercing capped ballistic capped at 500 metres, 0 degrees. Now, the muzzle velocity of the BS-3 is about 900 metres a second, which is a bit higher than the other 100mm guns in game, but it does seem safe to say that it would have the same, or at least very similar stats with regards to its ammunition if it was added into the game. as this seems to be the case with basically all the tanks that use the BR-412 ammunition. However, I will try and put the other penetration stats I've seen in the description or in the stats in case you want to check them out. Also, just in case you're wondering, the turret can turn. You can see here it's pointing rearwards. In the first picture, it's pointing forwards. Just in case any people were a bit confused, at first I thought it was a fixed gun mount until I found the second picture. So yeah, I don't know what the turning time would actually be with the turret, but I'm guessing it would be quite slow. But yeah, the turret can turn. The next important stat is, of course, armour. I'm not entirely sure what the armour of the turret would be, because obviously the turret's been quite modified, but again, it's going to be a later tier vehicle, so the armour's not going to be too important. The whole armour is probably going to be the same as the regular T-34s, 45mm, effective thickness of between some like 70 and 80mm. Speed, I'm guessing it's going to be slowed down quite a bit. The regular T-34s in-game do 34 miles per hour. I'm guessing it's going to be quite a bit slower than that, maybe something like 30, 25, because obviously you've got that huge gun. With regards to crew, I only really found one site that dealt with that, militaryfactory.com, which said there was 4 crew members, with the driver at the front and the 3 others presumably in the turret. That does seem the most logical sort of configuration for crew, because you don't need the bow machine gunner, so presumably there's 3 in the turret and 1 driver. The only other configurations that really make sense are 2 in the turret, 1 driver, or bow machine gunner driver and 3 in the turret. So where should this vehicle go in War Thunder? I think 6.7 seems the most sensible place. That's the same as the SU-100, which also has a 100mm gun. It could go to 6.3 possibly, if needed, but 6.7 seems to make the most sense. Although, again, like I said, they have changed all the battle ratings, so that will make it, it will end up going against a lot of Cold War vehicles, but if I put it lower, it's going to be going up against quite a few, World War II vehicles, and it's probably going to be a little too overpowered. So probably 6.7 seems the best place for it. And I think it would be a nice, unique vehicle for Egypt to have in the tech tree, and I think it would be good for the international tech tree as a whole. Now, the last Egyptian vehicle we're looking at is basically the same as the T-100, but with a 122mm D30 howitzer in it. Basically, the stats would be the same with armour and speed and crew, probably, or at least with minor differences. The weapon, though, of course, is a 122mm howitzer. It's not particularly great. I mean, it's got good ammo, but there's only 2 lots of ammo that are really relevant. Fragmentation, high explosive, and heat FS. High explosive isn't going to be very good at the higher tiers where this would have to be, and heat FS does about 460mm of penetration, according to my book, The Directory of Modern Military Weapons. So where would this vehicle go in War Thunder? Well, it would have to go on the assault gun line, I suppose, because it is a howitzer, but the high explosive shell isn't going to be that great at tier 5. You might get some success shooting the sides of lightly armoured vehicles, but that's not going to be, too helpful. Really, you're going to have to rely on the heat FS, which is actually more powerful than any other heat FS in the game, 460mm penetration. So it would have to go battle rating 7.7 or 8 if they bring that back. Not really sure if this tank is actually needed in the game. I just thought I'd add it in so people were aware there are more Egyptian vehicles. It would be nice to have it in the game, I'm just not really sure there's much of a role for it at the moment. So that's all the Egyptian vehicles, so how would Egypt itself fit into War Thunder with regards to events and such? Well, the obvious events would probably be with regards to, the various wars it's been involved in since the end of World War II. For example, the First Arab-Israeli War, the Suez Crisis, the North Yemen Civil War, the Six-Day War, the 1973 war, is it October War, Yom Kippur War? I've heard it referred to as both, and the Libyan-Egyptian War. So there's quite a few, different wars you could get events from. In some of those events, you'd probably have to use other nations' vehicles, but with Egyptian markings, because a lot of the Egyptian-made stuff wasn't around until sort of outside the game's timeline. You could probably also add in some different alternate history events, although the only ones that really make sense or stand out to me are maybe World War III type events, like World War III breaks out, Egypt has to take a side or defend itself from other nations, or maybe one of the superpowers tries to take the Suez Canal. Maybe the Suez Crisis goes a little bit differently. But there's quite a few different events for Egypt to be involved in, and you can get Egyptian camouflages and skins for various vehicles. And yeah, I think it could contribute quite well to War Thunder with regards to, events and camouflages and skins as such. So that's the end of this episode. Like I said, there aren't as many vehicles as I would have liked, but a lot of them were outside the timeline, or I just wasn't able to find enough information about them. But I think Egypt would be a nice nation to have in War Thunder. Next week we'll be looking at Finland. Obviously, Finland is kind of in a similar place, quite important in history, but didn't produce that many of its own tanks. But we get a few vehicles for that. After that, we'll be doing France, which is going to take a long time. I'll have to split that into multiple episodes. But anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Leave a like if you did. Leave feedback. Could always do with more feedback. Subscribe if you like these sorts of videos. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And if you enjoyed that episode, then don't forget to check out the rest of my channel and videos popping up on screen now.